Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Radical Dreamer Steve, and today we're talking about one of my very favorite N64 games, Diddy Kong Racing. Now, yes, with the N64, there might not have been a better console ever made for racing games. There's just so many good ones. But that said, Mario Kart 64 probably stands as the most iconic racer on the console to the majority of gamers, and I think Diddy Kong Racing is probably the game that gave Mario Kart 64 the biggest run for its money, and I would personally argue that it's actually the better game. However, does Diddy Kong Racing still have that rare magic in 2023? One of the biggest things that separates Diddy Kong Racing from the pack is the fact that it's a really fun single player experience, and that's mostly thanks to its adventure mode. The adventure mode basically sees you choose a racer, and you go on an island, you can explore, and there's lots of different little worlds with races contained in each one. You need to beat all of these races in various forms until you get to the final boss, Whizpig. Now with Mario 64, you're basically just doing circuits or versus mode. Diddy Kong Racing's adventure mode is actually very meaty. Expect this to take you somewhere between 5 to 15 hours, depending on how skilled you are. And if you beat it, there is an adventure 2, which sees a mirror mode for all the levels. Let's talk about that island for a second. Now, as a kid, it felt absolutely huge. I felt like, exploring that thing was like literally going to another world. But replaying it now, I'm like, well, it's a sandbox. It's fairly modest size, and honestly, there's not a whole lot to explore outside of the actual worlds that contain the races. That said, it's lush, it's full of different colors, and there's little secrets to find, like balloons here and there. You can race the genie, and you can do kind of fun little stuff like squish frogs. And honestly, the biggest pro of the island exploration, in my opinion, is the non-linearity of the game. Yes, you pretty much need to start in the first world, but just after having a few balloons, you could leave that world and go to Sherbert Island or Snowflake Mountain. And you could choose what order you'd like to tackle races and worlds in. So let's say you're stuck on a boss and you're just like, screw this, I'm going to toss my controller and break this TV, or I'm going to do something else. Well, you can cool down, go do a few races in a different world, come back mentally refreshed. And speaking of tough bosses, yeah, that's one of the things that makes this game really stand out. It's an easy game to pick up and play, but it's a very hard one to master. And Rare really expects the player to understand how to play this game, how to control each vehicle, and how to understand the layout of each level. Now, the basic adventure levels are very playable. The first time you go through, you just need to win the race. However, when you beat all those, you face the boss for round 1, which is also usually manageable, and then you go on to get the silver coins in each level. These kind of force you to get 8 to 10 coins, I forget the exact number, in each of the levels you already beat, but oftentimes they're kind of out of the way, or they're kind of on the edge of the road, and they can even be found in different routes. So you really need to know the layout of the level, and you really need to be good at, using drift, and really control your cart and know the level well. And beyond this, there's even a trophy race, which makes you play the same levels you've already beaten twice, but in a circuit mode much like Mario Kart 64. So there's so much stuff to do in each world. It really feels like this game has 2 to 3 times the amount of levels than it really does. And let's talk about bosses for a second, because that's, in my opinion, one of the only places where this game falters a bit. The bosses are insanely difficult. It took me many tries to beat just about every boss in this game, and they really require you to play almost perfectly to beat the boss. Usually the first round against the boss, not so bad. You just race against the dragon with the airplane. Round 2, that jerk's tossing flames out everywhere. You've got to dodge them, and it's really obnoxious. And honestly, this is one of my only complaints about the game, is you have these giant difficulty spikes of the bosses, and I don't know how the heck I beat most of them. As a kid, it didn't lose my mind. I remember them being not as hard as they were, because I was seriously challenged. And so yeah, the bosses are definitely frustrating, but the skill and mastery of the game required outside of bosses is honestly something where I think Rare really nailed it. And it really makes the level design flourish even more, because you need to know each shortcut, each place the silver coins are laid, the best ways to get through the levels to find the best power-ups, and so on. One of the other things that really sets this game apart is the fact that there's 3 different vehicle types with slightly different controls. You have your normal kart racers, but then you also have hovercrafts and airplanes. In my opinion, the kart and the hovercraft play really well. When you first get the hovercraft, it's going to feel like way too tight, like your turns are too strong, but just use the R button to jump and you can turn pretty easily. you don't really need to brake much at all with the hovercraft. I have to admit that I like the airplanes a lot less. I don't know why. I get smoked in most of the races with the airplane when it's not something that's easy, like when you're doing something like a silver coin challenge or a circuit mode. It feels like I need to play the level so many times to get first place with the airplane. And maybe that's just my skill level and me being a noob, but honestly, I play this game a lot and I still suck with the airplane, and I feel like it's a little bit harder to maneuver. Overall though, this game has really, really tight controls. Like if you're used to playing Mario Kart 64, expect them to be tighter in this game. And so it can take a while to adjust between them, but I think once you play enough Diddy Kong Racing, I think the controls actually feel better than they do in Mario Kart 64. And honestly, I think the drift is also done better in this game. Part of what made Mario Kart so much fun is the power-up system. You just never know what you'd get. When you're losing the race, you get something really cool. Well, pretty much toss all of that out the window with Diddy Kong Racing. There's no cheap power-ups like the blue shell. Everyone has the same choices of power-ups, and they're divided by balloon color. Red balloons are offensive stuff, like missiles. Blue balloons are speed boosts. Green balloons are things you lay down, kind of like bananas in Mario Kart. They're like piles of sludge or like thorn balls. And then there's also a couple extra ones, like you got the purple and yellow balloons, which I think make you like immune to shots for a few seconds. However, if you get 2 or 3 of the same colored balloon, your power-up increases. For instance, with the red balloons, 2 red balloons gives you a humming missile, much like a red shell in Mario Kart. 3 balloons gives you 10 shots. Now, the only thing I don't like about it is I often feel like the second balloon is as far as you need to go, and actually sometimes the better power-up, like usually with the homing shot with the red balloons. But this system works really well, and I think that it makes the game feel more balanced. However, that said, if you're losing a race or you're not such a good player, it pretty much makes it impossible to come back once you get too far behind. And of course, one of the biggest things we need to talk about with any N64 game would be the visuals and the sound. Well, the sound's actually absolutely killer. The soundtrack's done by David Weiss, who did the Donkey Kong Country games, at least the first 2, I think, and it is awesome. Such a fun soundtrack. It's fun, it's colorful, it's kind of playful, it really fits the mood. And the visuals, I think back in the day, were pretty incredible. This game didn't have that infamous N64 fog, and there wasn't really any pop-in to speak of. It had really bright colors, and honestly, stuff like shadows and the great level design. Those things still pop. It's colorful, the levels are really creative, fun to look at, fun to explore. Of course, the graphics are a little blurry by today's standards thanks to the lower resolution. So if you're playing this game, you're going to want to play it with something, either a CRT TV with the N64, something that's really good for a modern TV like, the Frame Meister or the Retro Tank, or you're going to want to be playing this via emulator. So, I think the graphics are definitely something that look a little bit less impressive now, but I think as you play the game for a few minutes, you will get used to it and you will really feel like you're immersed in the game after a couple of races.
Hello, friend. Select your abracadabra.
And finally, that brings me to multiplayer. As a kid, the multiplayer in this game was killer. I loved racing, and I thought Icicle Pyramid was pretty much the greatest battle stage ever. I played that level so many times. We could play a whole afternoon of just Icicle Pyramid. Now, replaying multiplayer with my wife and testing it by myself, I found 2-player fun, but I found once you add that 3rd and 4th player in there, the frame rate really suffers. It's a lot harder to see what you're doing, and so I can't really recommend it as a 3 or 4-player game as much as I used to. But with 1 or 2 players, this is still a really fun game. Alright, so is Diddy Kong Racing pretty much the best racer ever? Is it the best N64 kart racing game? Well, it has a few flaws. Obviously, the graphics don't hold up as well as they used to, but that said, they still pop, they're still colorful, and the bosses have massively frustrating difficulty spikes. But that said, the levels, the silver coin challenges, the circuit races are all so much fun. I think when you look at this game as a whole, all the characters you can choose from, the different vehicles, the awesome adventure mode, the way that Rare really maximized the levels, this really stands out as the ultimate kart racing game on the 64, if not of all time. And though I might not like some aspects as much as I used to, I still really love this game and think it's one of the best experiences you can have in both the racing genre and on the N64. Alright guys, that will do it for me. Let me know, who is your favorite character in Diddy Kong Racing, and what do you think of the game? Alright guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and smash the like button if you like the video. That really helps. Game on.